Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Storytellers. We are on time. It wouldn't be good for me to be late on a show that we're talking about deadlines, would it? If you ever wanted to work in comics, illustration, uh, advertising, one of the prerequisites is your ability to make deadlines. It's hard. Sometimes the pressures are there. Um, uh, with unrealistic deadlines that editors or art directors might put upon you. But there are ways around it. There are ways to get through it. And we're going to go and talk about some of those things tonight. It's what got me through 39 years in this business. I've lived and died by deadlines. If you give me a deadline, I'll make it. The longer the deadline, the better the product is going to be, obviously. But if you have to have it, I can get it done. And so can you if you follow a few of these rules that we're going to talk about uh, this evening. Uh, Everybody in the chat, it's good to see you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Ricky McCullough, Citizen Ronan, Leg Kick One. Hello, hello. Joseph Dredd is here. He says, hail. Hobby Halbert. He says, I love me some story time. Raven Saber says, hey, hey. Joseph Dredd says, hello, Mr. Graham. And then he says, Nolan. Bretsky the Great. Salute, chat. Salute, Graham. Hobby Halbert again says, hello. The Beam Pad is here. Elwin Monzi, my pal from Texas, he says I'm making Lauren sit in on this one. Well, I'll try not to bore her. Hello, Lauren. Good to see you. Wiley Draws is here. He's talking to somebody else in the chat. So we got a good crowd here, and more will be piling in. We had a weird day here today. Before we get into it, and give a few people a chance to come in. Just a few minutes ago, I'm looking out the front door, and first the day starts all sunny. Then it gets dark, and then the thunder, and I was shipping out some artwork today, and it just poured when I was at the post office. So I come home, I'm eating dinner, I look out the window in the front door, and it's raining right out there. The sun is out and it's raining, and it's kind of pretty sun shower stuff. It's like right on the street, right on my neighbor's house, and I look out the back door. The sun is there, and there's no rain. It's like, who is this cloud? And this is the second time this has happened, where it's rained right on the street, but not on our house and not in our backyard. Crazy. It was weird. I should have shot a video of it. Rob Younce is here too. Hello, Rob. Josh says, hail, Bane Father. Bill Field says hello. I don't know how many folks in the chat or those that are just kind of lurking and watching the show are artists or writers, but I think some of these things can apply to anybody who has any kind of a deadline. So let's start off with the first thing. It really, really is important to know your craft, because you're going to get scripts where you read them and you're going to be like, oh my God, this is horrible. I don't have the motivation for this. Well, what do you do if you don't have motivation and you have to get this done? Well, you rely on craft. There's a way to tell a story. There's a way to put pictures in order to tell that story. And that's the kind of thing you have to learn. Knowing that also gives you confidence. And with confidence, you don't dilly-dally over what you're putting down on the paper. A lot of artists, young and old alike, suffer from what I call analysis paralysis, where you're stuck on something and you can't get it out of your head. You can't move forward on the board. There's a story of what was his name? Great artist. Drawing a blank. But anyway, it'll come back to me. Anyway, he had this manic fear of blank pages, and it was Morton Meskin. That's who it was. Mort Meskin, amazing, amazing artist. Uh, but he was just paralyzed by a blank page. And when he was working with, I believe he worked for in the Eisner studio, but he also worked in Simon and Kirby, and I couldn't remember if it was Joe Simon or Will Eisner, who would see him, all constipated over this, and would come over and he'd take a pencil and put a pencil mark on the blank paper and says, "Now it's not blank," and that was enough. That was enough to get his head going and getting into stuff. So, I mean, I understand that when you're starting out with a blank page. You have a script and you got to figure it out. And sometimes that's daunting. So, knowing craft, knowing how to do that, and that's not something I can really go into here. That's a lifelong pursuit and a lot of studying. But in the absence of that, what we can do is some of these things. So, first off, the first thing I recommend is obviously read the script. And when you're reading the script, take notes. I write right on the script on each page. If it says page one, panel one, and it says, Batman is on a bull leading a stampede of horses. Okay, well, I know how to draw Batman, but I'm going to need reference. I'm going to need to know how to draw horses, how to draw a bull, or whatever it may be. So the first thing I would say to you is do all your pre-work ahead of time. Uh, don't try and discover it or work it out on the board, because that it will lead you to paralysis because you got a lot of other stuff on your mind at this point. So, A, read the script, take notes, and gather your reference. Have your reference because a lot of times you're going to be drawing stuff. I mean, unless it's something completely where you can make everything up, um, having the reference, at least for me, helps my mind think about, well, what does this look? What does this environment look like? What is this sequence going to look like? Um, and if I have that reference, even when I'm just laying it out, I'll have an idea of various shapes and forms and how they're going to interact with each other, uh, so that I can keep moving. So first thing, read the script, take notes, gather your reference, and then begin your layouts. When you lay out the story, the thing to do is to not let yourself get stuck because you're going to get stuck. You're going to come up to a sequence where you're having a hard time envisioning it, or the writer hasn't really explained it well. You have a lot of questions, or you're feeling like you got to go in a different direction. Um, uh, but either way, when you get stuck, move on. Put something down. It could just be the most basic, camera angle shot. Um, Boring as hell, but at least you know that those two guys are doing whatever they're going to be doing, and the rocket's going off in the background, whatever that is. Um, your composition might be boring, but it's down. Move on. You can always come back, but you have to keep that train moving. You have to keep um, everything moving forward at all times, because in the comic book world, you typically have 3 to 4 weeks to pencil a 22-page book, on an average of 5 to 6 panels a page. That's a lot of drawings, a lot of reference, and a lot of thinking goes into it. But if you have some of that stuff down ahead of time, it'll really help you out when you're moving forward. Um, if you have designs that have to a new character is introduced or a setting, let's say Batman has a new computer system or something like that, or he's got a new vehicle of some type, that all has to be designed. So that's what I mean when I say pre-plan. Get your stuff, get your drawings, get your ideas down and sketch them. It doesn't have to be tight or anything, but it's something you can wrap your head around and get it down on paper so that when you're starting to work on the boards, you're ready to go. And again, you're keeping that train moving. Simplify shapes is number 4. Uh, you don't have to draw everything. It's not cheating. I'm going to tell you that right now. So everybody just take a deep breath and say, I'm not cheating if I silhouette something. No, not at all. You pick the right moment to do it. Um, it can add a nice black contrast onto your page for a design element. It could add some neat atmosphere to the scene that delineating everything would just draw your eye away from. It's that simplicity. Um, so you don't have to, you don't have to render everything. So remember that. Remember to let your page breathe. Um, and put your focus on the payoff panel. Every page should have some type of focal point, whether it's an action thing or a cool location, or even a dramatic conversation. Some type of dramatic point that's being um, uh, put forward. These things, are what you should be focusing on. Like if it's a boring page and somebody says some kind of gotcha thing or something, okay, that's your that's your focal point. That's your panel that you need to, put the effort in and get you there. I'll show you some. I'll show you some pages and some examples of the kind of stuff I'm talking about, um, so that you get an idea. Let me share the screen here real quick. Here we go. Let's start with this one. Okay. These are some pages from Bane Conquest #1. Now, here's an example of what I was just talking about, where there's not a lot happening here. It's basically conversation, threatening conversation, yes. It's not a lot of panels. We got what, 4 panels on a page. So the way I figured is that the environment was the focal point here, the interesting thing to see. So that's where I spent the time putting the details and the perspective in. The other stuff are pretty much headshots with very minimal background. Um, so this is a page that you can get through. It still looks really cool, and you can get through it relatively quick. Okay, here's another one where we got a panel with no background. And it works perfectly because it accentuates the humorous aspect of what's happening here. This guy getting dragged away like, a puppy dog. We changed the scene, and now we have a new location, so it's important to establish that. So that requires a little bit more detail. But the rest of the 2 panels really don't. You just need enough to let people know what's happening and what's going on. Let's see here. Here's a this is an action one. So obviously, I felt that the most important sequence here was Bane busting through these dudes, um, and so that was the panel that the money shot, if you will. The other stuff is relatively easy. Um, Again, lots of shadows, lots of blacks, and it makes things pop, and it makes the page interesting, and you can get it done quickly. Now, of course, you're going to run into some pages where uh, there's no 2 ways around it. It's going to take time and effort. This is one that had a lot, foreign reference. I can't remember if I think this is the Casbah. I think I got reference for the Casbah. But here's an example of a silhouette. It's powerful, gets the job done. It leads us with the action, the line of action here, right into this panel, and then we can bounce right in, zigzag and bounce right out. But obviously, the electricity shot is the money shot here because Bane's getting zapped. So that's where the focus was. But this panel had to have a lot of detail because I've never been to the Casbah, and I'm pretty sure most of you have not. So you want to make it look authentic. Just see here if there's any questions that have come up while I'm talking here. Larry Cathy says, could eliminations of feet and additional pouches help make me a more successful artist? Maybe freehand huge guns. Whatever are you talking about, Larry? I don't know if it'd make you a more successful artist, but by eliminating some of that stuff, you might be a faster artist. Who knows? Marcus Killigrew is here. He says, hail, Chat and Graham. Kevin Wolf, rim lighting one side, not a halo, of your silhouette works well too and helps tie the silhouette into the environment. Hey, everyone. Normie Nerd is here too. He says, hello to all. Okay. So let's go back and see if we got any other examples here. Okay, so here's an example of I know I took notes on this page because I had to establish again the Casbah scene, so I had to have reference for that. This van, okay, it takes place over in North Africa, so it couldn't be just a Ford Econoline van. Had to be maybe a Mercedes or something like that, something that they would be driving over there. Needed that reference. Gun reference here. I needed that. So having that at your disposal before you get into it is huge, and it helps you move faster through your story. Again, here's the money shot. A couple quick, panels of action that lead you into it, and the semi-big reveal. Okay, so that's that one. Let's see here. That's not it. Stop screen. Okay. And then we'll share this one. All right, a little bit different style now. These are some pages from Alien Alamo. Now, I talked about simplifying forms. I went into this book with the idea that it was going to have an animated feel to it, so that the comic kind of looked like, or not looked like, but it was a little bit more reminiscent of the comics of the 1950s, in which the timeline of the story initially takes place. So to do so, I had to reference. I had to reference everything on the ranch, horses, dogs, obviously, and then take those drawings and simplify them. But all of this was done ahead of time with sketches. The first thing I did was look at animators. How do animators, because they're really great about that, taking realistic animals, particularly, and cartooning them and bringing out that anthropomorphic personality in them. And that's what I wanted in the story. So I started studying that and doing sketches ahead of time before I started my layouts. Now, when you're laying out organic stuff, if you've done it enough, um, that can really help speed you along, um, because you don't have to bring out the ruler. You don't have to do a lot of intricate perspective, um, because all the shapes are, organic. Uh, so that goes a long way in helping you get through a page there. So we got 2, 4, 5 panels here. Here's an example again. I could have drawn the horse and really, delineated him. But I thought it would really be cool as he's going through this little canyon area of these rocks to cast the shadow on him against that night sky so that the characters jumped out. Um, so by doing so, it serves two purposes. One, it moves along faster and gets me through. But also, there's the dramatic aspect of it. It's more dramatic to look at that, and it's that center panel. It really pops out at you. Another example back here, the rocks. Just a little bit of texture on them, but what this does is it saves me from having to draw all this detail on the rocks, but it also makes the forms here really jump out at you. It frames them. Okay, so here's a page again. I know I took a lot of copious notes on uh, something as simple as a skillet, a cast iron skillet. And knowing its shape, how it's concave, how it has that lip, that pour lip on both sides. Uh, and then I had to look at 1950s, kitchens to see what stoves and cabinetry and all that kind of stuff, and even like this coffee pot, you know, um, so that obviously it's not modern. And for me, when I'm laying out the story, that's the kind of stuff I get stuck on. If I don't have the reference for it and I have to make it up, I don't know what those forms are. I don't know what those shapes are and how they're going to relate to the figures about whom I'm trying to tell the story. Um, and I start to get paralyzed over it. Yeah, okay. No backgrounds, but don't forget we have word balloons that have to go in there and fit. Um, you don't need it. It won't do anything to move the story along. We already know where he's at. It's more important to focus on the conversation of of this father and son than to dazzle you with a bunch of crap in the background that's going to distract you. So when we do have another scene change, uh, look at look at that, all the detail. You know, reference the Jeep, so it's accurate. Even the spare tire on it, and that helps me move along. Landscapes, if I've never lived out west. I've never been to Montana or the hill part of West Texas. Um, so it's the kind of stuff uh, I have to research so that I feel comfortable drawing those environments. Oh, look at that, a silhouette again. Helps break up the page too, doesn't it? Whenever there's mechanical stuff, cars, spaceships, things that require perspective buildings. Um, those things, uh, well, particularly like vehicle type stuff. I can't stand to draw that stuff, so I got to make sure I got the reference um, for it. Things that need perspective, that could be a really great tool. Gil Kane was a master at this, at guiding the eye. Uh, you look at his layouts, he'll use the perspective of the background. Let's say it's in an office and Spider-Man and the Green Goblin have just busted through a window or something like that. He'll have the desks lined up in perspective so that it's focusing your eye where it needs to go, or he's doing it to lead your eye away from something. Very dynamic, and it's another great tool in the quiver, if you will. Okay, this was an elaborate page, even though it doesn't look it because of the all the blacks on it. But this was a lot of reference to gather. But by doing so ahead of time, it helped me. It helped me get the drawings the way I wanted them very quickly. And then this one, this was probably the biggest um, page in the book, as far as I'm concerned, is reference and time needed and stuff like that to really sell the idea of what was happening here. Uh, yeah, everything from the Japanese soldiers, their accoutrements, their weapons, and then the Marines, their outfits. You know, this is later part of the war. Their helmets changed. Um, they looked different. Um, so that was what I was trying to uh, make sure I got accurate, just in case any World War II Marines showed up to read this book. Uh, but this was a difficult page to lay out too because of the choreography of it. And a lot of stuff going on, and you're trying to focus on the drama of it. But I'm very proud of this page. It came out great, and you know, even though the finishes on it took a long time, the laying out of it and moving through to tell to let's try that again, to tell the story went along quickly. Okay, got some questions here. Normie Nerd is here. Oh, Owen has a question. What's the more common industry practice for failing to meet a deadline, replacing the artist, writer, or delaying the book? Giving them a bonus. It seems like, when I first came into the business, uh, the editors that were there, again, lived and died by the deadline. That's what was instilled in me by Joe Kubert, who was one of those old school guys too. Uh, but when you work for an editor at DC, and remember, there's only two places to go if you want to be considered in the big leagues, and that was Marvel or DC. And the editors there, if you didn't make your deadline, you cost them money, you cost them time, and you cost the company uh, possible sales because of you didn't meet. It's like a domino effect. If one part of this chain in this periodical that has to be published every 4 weeks breaks down and pushes everything back, it goes right to the printer, and the printer is now backed up, and it just keeps cascading from there. So missing deadlines it used to cost the companies a lot of time and effort, and it would cost you your career, unless you're Neil Adams, who missed almost all his deadlines. But he's Neil Adams, and it was worth the wait, I guess. But everybody else, has to make the deadlines. And I don't want you to think that by making the deadlines, you have to be a hack. Um, Not at all. Uh, some of the greatest artists in our business, Gil Kane, John Romita, John Buscema, Jack Kirby, machines, because, as I mentioned in the beginning of this, they knew their craft. They never got bogged down, with the exception of Romita. Romita did struggle with um, confidence and speed, which is why he eventually went on to become an art director, because he didn't like the monthly grind. But the guy was amazing. Uh, uh, Kane, Buscema, Kirby, those guys were machines. They could lay it down in minutes and get it right, 99% of the time. So being a deadline guy means you can do it with great quality as well. In fact, I almost argue that if you have too long a deadline, um, and this is a weird paradox. Um, if you have too much time, you'll fritter that time away till you have not enough time, and then you'll hurry through it. I know it sounds crazy, but that does happen. Um, Give me a decent deadline, one that is comfortable, and and you'll get the best work, and you'll get it on time. So, good question, Nolan. Rob Brown says one of the things I have a bad habit of is making stuff up. I sketch the general idea and make up the details. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, Rob. It's just that if you're trying to sell something that everybody knows, let's say a car or a coffee pot, um, if it doesn't look like what people know is a coffee pot or a car, and it's not intentionally supposed to not look like that, then that's a problem. But if you're doing a sci-fi thing and you're drawing the sci-fi army with guns, you can make that shit up all day long, and make it cool. Uh, The thing that Jack did so great, and John Buscema did so great when they were doing superhero comics is that uh, they didn't use a lot of reference. They could just draw everything really well and had drawn it at one time or another. So um, if they had to draw cars, uh, they were very stylized cars, guns made up. Yeah, it sort of looks like a Tommy gun, um, but it ain't. And that's how those guys were able to blow through everything. It was all the focus was on the characters, uh, and that has changed. Our business is much more detail oriented. The readers want more than that. They want more realism in the look of things, even if it is cartooned or stylized. They want details. So it takes longer to do comics today, I think. Um, Although I look at some of these guys, the European guys and the Brazilian guys, from the 70s, the uh, Filipino guys, they put a ton of detail and stuff, you know, back in those days too. So maybe I'm wrong. It happened once. Marcus says I did a 7-page story for Mythic America's game company, and it was about Mayan legends. Talk about reference. Oh, well, I know I can beat everybody when it comes to reference. When I did uh, Expendables Go to Hell, and I've talked about this before. I had one panel on a whole page that with a million other different pieces of reference. But I had in this one panel, I had to have Sylvester Stallone as Barney. I had to have Audie Murphy as Audie Murphy in his World War II army dress. Um, I had to have he had a Tommy gun, and Barney had like an M4, something like that. Okay, those are references. And then in the background, they're being charged by an Assyrian war elephant with warriors on top, archers on top, all shooting their arrows at our heroes. And then there was then there was on the ground running towards them was warriors from all these different continents, countries, eras. Everything from cavemen to a Mayan warrior to a samurai. Yeah, and these are all these background characters that are all running towards our characters in one panel. I called Chuck up and I said, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. Rob Young says, I do not draw comics, but I use the just get something on paper to get started. But I use the just get something on paper to get started. You know what? Yeah, what I'm talking about here is very true for writing as well. Uh, I'll, I'll get an idea for something, but it's not fleshed out, and I'll just put notes next to it and say, you know, uh, has to get from point A to point B. What if blah blah blah? Question mark. Move on. Move on to the scene that I know that I've got in my head, and then come back to it. Maybe look at it freshly and say, "Ah, that's crap," or "What was I thinking?" Or "Hey, that's a great idea." One of those three things will hit you. Rancid Potato is here. Hello, Rancid. I love hearing that attention to detail, Graham. Thank you. Uh, I like the silhouettes. This is a great book. Love hearing the creative process. Oh, talking about, well, I'm not sure which book Rob's talking about. He's talking about Alien Alamo or Bane Conquest. Ah, well, this is the part where people are talking about Alien Alamo, I guess. Thank you. Admiral Wackass says, AA was great storytelling. My bread and butter, buddy. Rob liked them both. Liked the Chinook too. Raven Saber has got to go back and read the Chinook again. Ramita is so good. Just look at his amazing Spider-Man covers. Oh, he's one of the legends. The Angry Gamer says, seems like a nice day to enjoy a cigar. Indeed. I just picked up some Rocky Patel Javas. One's a Madeira, and it's amazing. It's like this dessert cigar. Like the outer wrapper was soaked in coffee and cherry. So it's got this really, really delicious taste and smell. Highly recommend it. Rocky Patel Java. They got Java Mint, Java Red, and the Madeira. Edwin Delecchio says, given that you have had a very long career in the industry, I have to ask, you obviously have had a very successful career, but what would you do differently? Regret making certain decisions with your work? Maybe not standing your ground in editorial decisions your thought was dumb, etc. That's a great question. Uh, well, I've got a few regrets. One was uh, not being confident enough in the beginning. I was always comparing myself to John Buscema, Jack Kirby, Ramita, Gil Kane, all of these guys that were still working in the business at the time and were great influences on me. When I would look at my work and I would compare it to them, these veterans, and I would just get down on myself, And there's nothing that smells worse on a page than lack of confidence. Uh, it just reeks. It's like going for a job that you're desperate to have. You can smell that desperation on a person, and I think it's the same thing too with art. That your lack of confidence comes across in every line that you put down. But once you overcome that, and for me, it took to my 40s before that happened, or before I was like, yeah, yeah, I've got this. I know what I'm doing now, and I don't listen to editors whose suggestions I disagree with, or whose opinions I don't respect. Um, uh, I would go ahead and do it my way, and that's when the work really started to take off. So that's my biggest regret. Uh, Certain decisions, you know, uh, I guess I didn't try to push my writing enough, um, because I've always felt that I was a writer that drew. not an artist that writes, because it was all about story to me. I wish I'd have would have maybe pushed a little harder to write and draw um, some of the projects that I worked on. But everything comes around, and that's what I'm doing now. So, and I'm happier now than ever in my career. So, uh, sometimes it just takes time, you know, to come back around. The splintering is here. He says hello. Oh, Christina Lynn is here. Hello, Christina. Delaware Comic Dudes is Hail Graham and Comicsgate. Hail to you. Edwin says, you should know one of the first comic books I got my hands on as a kid was Vengeance of Bane. Your art just blew me away. I read it over and over. Well, thank you, Edwin. That's very kind. That is one of my favorite examples of storytelling is Vengeance of Bane. I was at a I was in a mindset that I wanted to tell that story like a storyboard. So if you look, there's a lot of pages where the panels are pretty much grid or straight away, not a lot of stuff coming out of panels and stuff like that, because I wanted to do like what Alex Toth used to do, and have all the design elements within the panel, and sell the idea and sell the story on that, and not just over the top random angles or shots, um, uh, just for effect. It kind of reminds me of a conversation I had with Howard Chaykin when I saw him at a convention recently in New Jersey. And we went out to dinner one night, and that's always interesting. Howard and I um, uh, have a similar take on storytelling, uh, very different take on politics and stuff like that, but that's okay. We have great conversations, and he's a incredible talent. And that guy knows storytelling. Anyway, well, one of the things that I was pointing out, and he agreed entirely, was that the best storytelling is the kind you don't see, and that is that uh, if you take an angle that somebody doesn't recognize because it's not part of their life, um, let's say an extreme up view or something like that of some guy's face, we rarely see that. Our lives and our perceptions of the world are pretty much at 6 feet, or whatever the average height of a man or a woman is. That's how we see our world, unless you're up on a building or in an airplane or swimming underwater and looking up. But most of everything in our lives happens at eye level. And so telling a story from that perspective um, is much more inclusive, I think. I think people relate to it more. And when you do the crazy angles or crazy shots, they have to have meaning, the way Alfred Hitchcock used to use them. Um, because then it really stands out. Like if you decide you're going to just do this aerial shot, well, it better be to show the smallness of somebody, or the giantness of perspective of somebody looking down on. There's a lot of emotions that can be tied to the angles, and they shouldn't be random. They should be there for a purpose. They should be thought out. There's a great scene in William Wyler's Western, The Big Country. And the whole thing is about, oh, big country, big country. It's a huge country and everything like that. And Gregory Peck is a sea captain. And one of the guys says to him, you ever see anything this big? And he just looks at him and he goes, yeah. You have what? A couple of oceans. And the guy couldn't understand that. But that theme of man being small and the land being big runs through that entire storyline. And there's this fight that's been coming up between Gregory Peck and Charlton Heston. And the fight is shot from like 100 yards away. So you got all this vista of the West out there, and these little teeny figures off in the distance, And even the sound effects, they'd come in close every once in a while, but the sound effects of the punches would be like, oh, because it's so far away. Um, that's a great example of the camera being used, uh, and that shot being used for a specific purpose, and that is to remind you how small we are and how our problems are small too. They may seem important to us, but they really aren't in the world. Um, that's brilliant. So anyway, these are the kind of storytelling things that I talk about at dinners. Now nobody wants to have dinner with me. Christina says she's still working on the comparing myself to others thing. It's a tough hurdle, Christina. It really is. But you'll do it. Yeah, sometimes you just have to look at your stuff and say, damn, this is good. You know. Hey, Big Raj, thank you for that $1.99 super sticker. Much appreciated. The splintering is here. Hey, he says, good evening, Graham. Hail chat. Marcus says, didn't John Buscema have a photographic memory? I don't know. I never heard that before. Pantheon, when you lay out your pages, do you use word balloons to help lead the eye? Uh, no, I don't put the word balloons in. I let the designs lead the eye, but I have to be mindful of who's talking though. So it's important to, you know, set the stage, if you will, so that the person that's talking um, is on the left-hand side if possible. Sometimes it's not possible, but you try to make it so that your word balloons go in the order they're supposed to. Not always possible without, sometimes you have to have a leader, you know, going across. Um, because unlike a film where you don't have the word balloons, they could be anywhere and still talking. So yeah, so I usually put the word balloons in later, but I think subconsciously in my head, I've got an idea of who and what are saying. And when I'm writing it myself, it's a much more fluid um, process than working from somebody else's script because um, the words that I have written down on my script are completely not interchangeable, but currently are constantly being reworked. Um, I'll take entire sentences out, the word balloons out, or I'll put something in, because now I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the drama in the visual sense, um, and so yeah. So I try to keep it really fluid that way, not lock myself in. Uh, should stop that screen. There we go. Random question. What do you think about Don Newton? I loved Don Newton. The first time I ever saw him was when he was doing the Phantom for Charlton Comics, and I wanted to love the Phantom. My mother's favorite hero is the Phantom, but it was so badly drawn, and those Charlton comics were pretty dull and lame compared to Marvel and DC of the day. And then wow, all of a sudden Don Newton comes along and he's got this gorgeous figure work and this great dramatic lighting and stuff. And I just fell in love with his work right then and there. And then he moved over to DC and eventually took over Batman. And in fact, when I took over Batman years later, Don Newton was one of the primary influences on how I approached Batman. So that's what I think about Don Newton. Wish I could have met him. I was up at DC around the time he passed, um, because I ran into E. Nelson Bridwell, who was an editor and one of the librarians up there. An incredible knowledge of comics. This guy, If he didn't know it, it didn't happen. But anyway, he came up to me at a New York Comic Con and told me about Don's passing before it got was out into the news. So that's how I found out about it. Newton was a health nut, you know, and he didn't believe in pasteurized milk or something. Is the story I remember, and he was drinking some of that stuff, and he got an infection, and you know, it ended up killing him. I think he was only 42, something like that. He's pretty young. Citizen Ronan reminds us to never compare yourself to anyone else. You're the only one in existence. That individuality is what makes you and your talent unique, Christina Lynn. Very true. Very true. Words of iron there from Citizen Ronan. Wow, such high praise for Newton. Love to hear that. I really love his work on Batman. Yeah. Travis T, 49. What's 40? Is that how old he was when he passed? 49? I'm not sure what you're referring to there. Yeah, one of the things you have to be honest when you're presented with deadlines. You have to. I know Joe used to say, "Never turn down a job. Worry about how you're going to get it done later." Uh, and that is true to a certain extent. When you have the confidence of a Joe Kubert, you can figure out ways to do that. Because again, we go back to um, the first thing I mentioned, which was craft. And once you understand your craft, um, hey there, Delaware Comics dude. Once you understand your craft, then you can confidently lay down your story without getting the analysis paralysis I talked about. Um, you may not love it, you know, but it'll be professional and you'll get it done. Um, and there was a time when you were rewarded for that, for your hard work and saving their ass and all of that. And I'm strictly talking about comics. I worked in advertising too, and their deadlines were, they're unforgiving as well. Uh, and you didn't make them, they could lose that client, which could be a big account. You know, it's really, really important. And you know, this even transitions over into the deadlines that that I give myself for and all of us who are doing these self-publishing ventures now. You have to be honest with yourself with your deadlines. When you tell your backers, okay, I'm going to have this book by such and such a date, you better damn well have it ready to go. If you don't have it ready to go, then they need to know about that, and they need to know why. Uh, is this something that's happened that's out of your control? Okay, everybody will be understanding of that. But if you're, screwing around on your, PlayStation 6 or whatever it is now, I know a lot of guys that do that. They play games, and they get locked up in that, and they fritter away hours when you could be down, your nose can be down at the grindstone and getting the work done. Oh, that's another thing. Turn the TV off, turn the radio off. Uh, don't get distracted. Stay focused. Commitment and focus. That goes so far in so many aspects of life. Commit to it, stay focused, and push forward. That's how you get stuff done. Whether it's the fulfillment of a dream, a particular job, a diet you're trying to follow, whatever it is, those are the pathways to success in that stuff. Um, so yeah, so that's what I got to say about that. Trump Nolan in 2024. Well, that would be a ticket. Travis T says died of massive heart attack, perhaps from the infection, sepsis. Yeah, consistency. Yeah, another good uh, quality to have. Young people have so many more distractions these days. Yeah, you know what? If you're the type of person that embraces distractions, you'll find them anywhere. You can go and count silverware if you had to. If you really didn't want to sit down at the drawing table and draw, uh, and that's what happens. You know, a lot of guys they just don't want to commit. They don't want to sit down. They don't want to draw that story because now they got to do all that reference work, and they don't get to just draw Superman flying in space, smashing meteors, or some fun stuff that they like to draw. You know, this is commercial art. You got to draw what you got to draw if you want to get paid. And if you want to get paid, you got to get the stuff in on time and it's got to be good so that they hire you again a second time. So being on time and being good, huge in moving your career forward. Funny you say that because I need all those things at once to turn it into white noise and focus. So radio and TV are on all the time. Discipline takes over when belief needs a break. Yeah, discipline should always be there. Mhm. What's this? I disagree. Striving can be inspired by comparison. It's where the fun of competition comes from, though one must plumb the emotional and intellectual balance nexus of self and creation. Ooh, that's deep. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to. Let me go back and see what Citizen Ronan said. I can't find it. Hmm. Well, anyway. Um, so I think that's about it, guys. It's gonna be a shorter show here today. I've been having trouble sleeping, and I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning last night, and I tossed and turned for another 2 hours. Finally, at 4 o'clock, I got up. Um, Pumpkin heard me, and she said, "Oh, I want to get up too, Dad." So she got up with me, and she came down. So we came downstairs, and we were watching movies and stuff until until breakfast around 6 or 7. So I was up killing time um, and not sleeping. So I think I'm gonna have to, call it a night tonight and get some shut eye and hopefully be able to sleep through the night. Every once in a while, I get into these sleep patterns, and I don't know what it is. All of a sudden, I start thinking about everything. I'm thinking about all the stuff for fulfillment and products that I need to order, and the shit that I can't do anything about at 2 in the morning. But there they are. Uh, so uh, hopefully, hopefully, I'll get a good night's sleep tonight. But anyway, I want to thank all of you guys, as always, for coming in and watching my little show, listening to me ramble, and share some of my thoughts on the business, thoughts on storytelling, which is a passion of mine. I do appreciate you guys, and it wouldn't be the same without you. And I love the interaction as well. Um, so you guys are the best. Let's catch up again on the Kings on Monday. And I think I'm going to have a very special guest next Wednesday on the Storytellers. I see an email has come through. I got to read it and make sure that this person said yes before I announce it. And but I'm pretty sure he did. So you'll be hearing about that next week. So tune in to the Storytellers next week. You guys have a great weekend, and we'll catch up then. Have a good one. Bye bye.